While it may have looked like we were pretty much done with the garden cleanup last week, we still have quite a bit more to do.
Okay, we shook it out for you, Mom.
Good. We folded up the rest of the row covers and assessed them for any damage. And sometimes we can repair them, but sometimes they're a little too far gone, so we just have to get rid of them. I taught the boys how to do the daisy chain too, and they said it was super fun.
Good. That's perfect.
This looks really good, Mom.
It does look really good, Kian.
We removed a lot of the debris in the garden and then placed it in piles in the back of the garden. I think in theory I would love to let it decompose right there, but the reality is that it often gets in the way. So I have a couple piles in the back that will compost down, and I'll put that material back into the garden once it's broken down more. Another task that we've been working on is removing a lot of the rocks from the garden. They seem to grow just as well as the plants do, so we take a lot of them out every single year. In addition to the rocks, another garden chore that I really needed to wrap up was removing the old asparagus stalks and making room for the new ones. I really need to get in there and weed, so I needed to get the old stalks out, and it's just nice to have them all trimmed up and ready for a new season. It's a good day in the garden because I am starting more seeds today. I printed out my little list here. I do not have very many for this week, just 2. I am planting some lettuce in soil blocks, and I'm also planting some echinacea. The lettuce, I am planting a variety called Winter Density. Usually I plant that in the fall and have it go into winter. Obviously by the name you can tell it does really well in the cold, but I decided I wanted to start a really early set of lettuce, and Winter Density is usually like my go-to if I want something that's really cold hardy. So I'll start with that, and then as the season goes on and I'm succession planting, I will pick different varieties based on what weather the lettuce is growing in. Echinacea is native to my area that I live in, so it grows really well here, and I have a couple of plants already and they have just been so easy that I am planting some more of those in the flower beds in the garden. I love that they're perennials, so I don't have to replant them every year, and they also have all of the good medicinal properties. I'm almost done. I just have a little bit of soil to put on the top of the echinacea. I'm thinking it's going to be the best course of action. I actually don't remember what I did the last time I sowed echinacea, if I covered it, if I just surface sowed it. The lettuce, I definitely surface sow every single time. It just germinates better for me because it's a really tiny seed and they need light to germinate. But the echinacea, I'm not really sure, so I'll report back on how that goes. I'm just gonna put a little bit on there and that'll be it for the night. The project in the garden today is to replace all of our rebar stakes that we have in the ground with wood stakes. I had used rebar stakes to mark out where my garden beds were and where the walking paths were, but we ended up pulling a lot of those out throughout the years. One, because they were super hazardous for anybody walking around. People would trip on them, and I was always afraid with little kids around that somebody would trip and fall on top of it. And the second reason that we pulled them out was because when we used silage tarps, they would poke up through the tarps. So I had to pull a lot of them out for that reason as well. But they were really nice for being very exact in marking out where the garden beds were, so I could use a string line and mark all that out. Once we replace all the rebar with wood stakes and we mark everything out, what I am planning on doing after that is I am going to resolve a problem that I had last year. It was a major drainage problem with my tomatoes. I ended up losing half of my tomatoes, and maybe some of you guys have seen that video from last year. It was so devastating at the time. But in the end, it ended up being okay, and I was able to grow enough tomatoes, but I vowed that I would not let that happen again. The reason for that happening was our soil has really poor drainage everywhere on our property. The soil itself is a very dense and heavy clay. 3 years ago, I plowed my soil to set up the garden, and I used my rotary plow to make a mounded row where the soil level was higher than the walking path. So it allowed for really good drainage, and I had no issues. Then over the following years, I didn't do any plowing or tilling, and the most soil disruption I ever did came from broad forking and pulling carrots and harvesting potatoes. And then eventually, with time and with rain and with filling my walking paths with wood chips, the mounded garden bed soil leveled back out with the walking paths. I wrongfully assumed that because I wasn't disrupting my soil, I would not have the same drainage issues that I had all over the rest of my property. I knew about all of the benefits of no-till gardening. I knew how important all of the microbes were and to keep all of the soil structure intact. I was very dogmatic about no-till gardening. I didn't want to raise the soil back up again with the plow. I made a huge mistake when I didn't take into account my context of my soil, and I still definitely feel like no-till is the way to go. There is a lot of studies to back that up, but as I said, you have to make it work in whatever context you're growing. For me, I have to make sure that I keep proper drainage, and what that is going to mean is I'm going to need to take the soil from my walking path and put it back on top of my garden bed. So there's two ways I could do this. One is I could take a shovel down the whole walking path and shovel the dirt by hand, putting it back on top of the garden bed. Or the second way is I could take my BCS and the rotary plow out, and I could do the same thing, save myself a ton of time. So I'm gonna do option 2 and take my BCS and do that. It will only take me a few minutes, whereas if I did that with a shovel, it would probably take me a half hour to an hour per walking path. I know it's a little bit more rough on the soil, but all that said, the disruption will be kept to the walking paths, not the actual garden beds. This row and this row, I already fixed the drainage several months ago because I was planting garlic here. It's popping up right now. And then over here, you can see just how flat this area is. This is what I have not fixed drainage on. And over in here, a couple of these rows were under the quick hoops, so I still need to fix this one and this one. The entire tomato devastation last year was a lesson well learned on my end, that if you take a certain garden practice a little too far, you can actually end up causing more damage in the end. I also learned to keep an open mind. I still definitely strive to do all the other aspects of keeping healthy soil. In addition to disrupting the soil as little as possible for my context, I'm also still striving to do all of the other important things that you need to do to keep healthy soil, like keeping the soil covered as much as possible and keeping the soil planted as much as possible. So to sum up my entire experience, I learned that it's so important to take context into account in addition to all of the other things that you know and have heard and have read about. And the science says context determines how you will implement those things. For part of the day yesterday, it was pouring rain, and so the garden is super wet today. I can't really do a lot in here, but I am gonna take down my trellises from last year and have the kids help me with that.
A little more in the middle. Actually, I think this is fine. Oh, don't go through that.
There's a string stuck. Noelle, cut that string. Oh, they got it. So the boys are gonna do a T-post war. They're gonna race to see who can get out the T-posts the fastest.
Ready, set, go. You can. No, it's called being me. Yeah. Sometimes good, I feel.
So the onions are looking good. Some types are germinating better than others. I went pretty heavy on the seeding because onions do best when the seed is really fresh, like you bought it that year, and these were all from last year, so I was worried about the germination rate and that it would be lower, so I seeded a lot in each one. But I'll separate them out later. And kale's looking good. Cilantro's starting to pop up now. Celery still real quiet over there. And then these are the new ones I just did, so they're not up yet.